What's up guys, in this video I'll be rehauling the new Trick or Treat Studios Halloween Kills mask. I just want to say that this isn't exactly a tutorial video, but more so just me documenting my experiences and sharing what did and didn't work, so I hope in some shape or form this helps. I wanted to go for more of a screen accurate look for this mask, and I know it's not 100%, but I'm definitely happy with the outcome, and I hope you guys like it too. This is also only my second rehaul ever, and I'm pretty new to this, so if you have any feedback, definitely feel free to let me know. So this is the mask brand new, and I definitely want to say that I think they did a much better job with this one compared to the 2018 mask. The paint isn't so thick that it's obscuring the detail, and of course the sculpt is just excellent. It's definitely a good starting point for a mass-produced mask. So to start off, I'm just dremeling the eye cuts a bit to make them a tiny bit wider, and also just to give them more of a jagged appearance because they're supposed to be kind of cracked on the edges. I didn't have to do too much, but it's just enough to give a little bit of extra depth to the mask. And I'm basically doing the same thing around the neck, just making those cuts more open and apparent, but not taking off too much to make it distracting. And here you're going to see the mask with all those adjustments made. So this is now me removing the hairline, but at some point along the process, I decided to take off all the hair and just start over and do it myself. And looking back, I think I would have stopped myself from doing that just because of how much work it ended up becoming. But you're not going to see the bulk of it because it's not very interesting and it's just a lot of tedious work. And you can see how hard and stuck on that hair is to the mask. It was just crazy, and it got to the point here where I just had to cut off a lot of it along the hairline with an X-Acto knife, and that's all manual, so yeah, very painstaking. I then went ahead and took naphtha to get the glue dissolved and removed from the hairline because it was still there, of course, and after all that I just prepped the mask with the naphtha as well, but you do need to be careful because it can distort your mask and dissolve the latex. So now I've moved on to doing the base coat, but you can see there's something wrong with the mask. There's all that splotchy brown paint, and that's because I previously tried to do a brown base coat. Essentially, I wanted to lay the brown on and then dry brush white paint on top of that, which is another technique that people do, but it didn't really work out. At some point during the process, I got a bit of messed up paint with some debris in it, and also it got a little drippy, so when I tried to fix it, it just messed everything up and things went downhill. So I had to strip off as much brown paint as possible, and I had to blend the rest in with some naphtha. Thankfully the brown paint was kind of thin, otherwise you would have seen the outline of all those splotches. I then changed my mind just to do a white base coat instead. And by the way, this paint is just 1 part distilled water, 1 part latex, liquid latex, and 1 part acrylic paint. After spraying to get more opacity, I'm finally at this point where it looks okay now. And I've also added a little bit more of a yellow tint to the paint, just to give me a better coat to work with off the bat, because it's not going to be perfectly white. Now I'm spraying water on my mask to get it ready for the wash. Essentially, it's just some black paint with brown paint, all acrylic mixed with some water, and it's spread everywhere on the mask to the point where it gets in all the nooks and crannies. And then when you wipe off the excess, only the paint in the deeper crevices will remain. And it's normally a good technique that works for most people, but for me, I just wasn't able to get it to work with this mask. And I just wasn't too successful, so I opted to actually paint in the areas where there are cracks and crevices, just leave it, and then dry brush over that. So we're kind of back to my original idea anyway with the brown base coat. Of course, this is also why this isn't a tutorial video. I'm messing up and I'm showing you guys all of it, but hopefully this gives you guys ideas too. As you can see, the dry brushing is actually working out to pretty good effect, and I can get a lot of detail this way. I'm pulling a lot of white over in that top corner there, but you can see those cracks forming and just showing up. With more progress, more dry brushing, I'm getting closer and closer to a look that I actually want to keep. I thought that the mask was looking a little too dark, so I sprayed on a light coat of white, only to find that it was a little bit too much, and I had to go back and actually paint in a lot of the detail by hand, all the different cracks and recesses and whatnot. But you're going to find that I always do something and then have to tone it back and roll it back. It's a very back and forth process where I have to blend things out and compensate for one thing I did, but it's just part of learning and figuring stuff out. You're just going to see a bunch of shots of me adding in those details with a tiny brush. And I'm basically just using some watered down black acrylic paint and a little bit of gray here and there. Just nothing too heavy and too distinct. I do have a little bit of paint on my brush, not much. And there's also some water on my finger for just blending the paint. I'm trying to keep the details more subtle here. Now I'm finally moving on to weathering and shadows. I have a little bit of yellow that I'm using first to apply to the nose, lips, and eyes with the makeup brush, and that's just to add more of a decayed, nasty look. I did apply quite a bit of yellow to the burnt side, but I think I went a little too far. I did see some screenshots where the mask looked pretty yellow, but I dial it back and get more of a burnt brown look instead, which is more appropriate. And then I'm also adding some shadows to the lips and nose, also a bit to the cheeks later too, just to give them more of that signature look. And eventually I get to applying more highlights, some white paint to the nose, the cheeks, and a little bit to the forehead, just to give more depth and just layer on more colors. There's a lot of layering going on here to achieve the look that I'm going for, because I do want things blended out and I don't want to have that kind of two-faced look. I want there to be a natural progression from light to dark, or normal to burnt, I should say. Then I'm going back with that small brush to paint in more of those details and make them pop in the darker areas. And the burnt area is getting more love once again because I just can't seem to decide on a color I want, I guess. After doing that, I'm now brushing on the black paint for the burnt charcoaly effect. And again, this was something that was a little too heavy at first, and I had to dial back the black and blend it. But eventually I get to the point where after all these adjustments, all this blending and layering, I'm at a point where I'm happy with the mask as it looks. And you're going to see now some close-ups of everything I've done up until this point. Again, a lot of back and forth, like I've been saying, just redefining areas of detail and making sure that I get a good balance between the light and dark colors. Now I'm using Liquitex matte varnish to clear coat the mask and protect the paint. It also saturates the colors a bit and gives it a little bit more of a sheen, which I do like. I then use the gloss version to spray the burnt side and give it more of that shiny look to sell that effect. Finally, we got some blood up in here. This is just clear Elmer's glue with red food coloring and then red and black acrylic paint, just so it's not too bright. But the reason I'm using the Elmer's glue is so that the paint will actually stay wet and sticky looking. You don't want to clear coat over that either, otherwise it's going to become matte. I'm just kind of globbing up a little bit more paint on the wound to give it more texture, and I'm just pulling it downward a little bit, but not all the way towards the neck, just because of personal preference. Finally, we're on to rehairing the mask, and this took a lot of time. This is basically the first, or I guess kind of the first rehair I've done to this extent, and it was a lot of work. I just basically had to cut out even sections of hair, at least starting off, and I just layered them one on top of another after putting beads of glue down. You can see I've gotten up to this point and I'm just laying a bead down, which I will then put on some more hair. And the further up I go, the longer the hair gets, just for more of that pompadour kind of look. I know some of you experienced guys are probably cringing right now because of how I've cut and applied this hair, but always trying to learn and get better at this stuff. Now I'm also applying some glue to the front of the hairline, which I applied that front hair a little earlier, but that glue will basically be used so that I could pull the hair back, almost kind of fold it back, and lay the hair down just to give a little bit more of that poofy look up front, and then also just clean up the hairline. I'm trimming the hair now too, just because I did make it a little too long on the side, and now I'm wetting it just to go ahead and get it ready for styling. You could see how bad my hair is just in the back because of how choppy and messed up it looks. I'm pulling the hair, I'm twisting it, and I'm just rubbing it together and getting all matted just to make it look nasty. Nothing really too specific going on here, and I also apologize about this not being in focus. Eventually, you see that the choppy and messed up hair doesn't look so bad anymore after all the styling, and I did also have to go back and fix the hairline a little bit because the glue wasn't completely dry. But in the end, the hair turned out pretty good looking in my opinion. Now I'm actually burning the hair just because I was curious about how it would actually look if I did that. I'm getting some pretty good chunks and globs here and there, but you can imagine this really isn't the best thing to do indoors. It didn't smell good, but here's the hair after doing a bit of extra burning, and I do like that texture. But of course, I couldn't continue that on and do that the whole time. So I take some more clear glue with some black paint and latex, and I just mat it into the hair. I really get it globbed in there for that burnt effect. And I think that, along with the burnt hair, ended up making things look good. I'm airbrushing some black paint on the burnt side just to get it blended, and then I also do a bit of that on the other side just so that it looks a little darker, because I know you guys said for my 2018 rehaul that the hair was a little too light colored. Last but not least, I'm spraying on another coat of that gloss varnish directly onto the hair just to make it look that much more burnt and crispy. Finally, I spray one last coat of matte varnish, and it really made all the highlights in the colors just pop. I'm really happy with how everything has turned out, and the mask is pretty much done at this point. I'm showing you guys some shots of the mask in indoor lighting, and you can really see as I turn this thing around how the colors come together and how that clear coat also ties everything together as well. And I'm very happy with the transition, as I mentioned earlier, from the regular latex to the burnt latex. I'm going to be following up with some outdoor shots of the mask, and I really do think it looks awesome in natural lighting, but I'll let you guys see for yourselves. If you made it this far, thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. Hopefully you picked something up from the video, and maybe you learned something from one of my mistakes. Also, if you have any tips or tricks for me, definitely feel free to let me know. Thank you again, and stay tuned for more. Hope you guys have a good one, and take care.